It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Smooth and Savvy is joined by some of the hottest talent in the entertainment industry, from musicians to authors and all those in between. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Smooth and Savvy himself, Douglas Coleman.
Hey, ho, 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 hee, hee, ha. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are you? If you're contemplating a career change, I urge you to listen to this interview coming up with Susan Bremer O'Neill. She had a career change that went from one end of the spectrum to the other. It was amazing to listen to her story, to think that somebody would actually go from being a scientist to being a stripper. I think that if you're contemplating a career change, it couldn't be as bad as that, or as extreme as that. In any event, that'll be coming up in just a few minutes. But first, I want to play a song. It is a jazz ballad by Christophe Duvalier. He is a French pianist and composer, and this song has so much emotion to it. Jazz music has always been regarded as impressionist music, sort of left up to interpretation. This song, to me, sounds like what a broken heart would sound like if you could hear a broken heart. It's just wrenching sorrow and sadness, and that's what I got when I listened to this song. Maybe you'll hear something different. So here is Monaxia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Monaxia by Christophe Duvalier.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on The Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps from the UK, record producer, engineer. You might have heard of me. I've worked with artists from Elton John to Led Zeppelin to Bad Company, Twisted Sister, Robbie Williams, Oasis, many, many great bands and artists in the past and the present and hopefully in the future. But you can work with me as well. You know, all you got to do is get in touch with me on eppsmusicproductions.com. That's EWPSproductionsmusic.com. And I can help you with your productions and with your recordings. A lot of people do home recordings now, which you can only take so far. Maybe they need a bit of professional help. So get in touch with me and we can sort it out. And thanks for Douglas Coleman for giving me the spot. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat. See? Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Wrong hat.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
She is an author, speaker, and self-relationship coach and has been a pioneer and trailblazer her entire life. She went from being a scientist to an exotic dancer at the age of 34. In 2000, she founded Self-Appeal, and in 2004 produced the Woman Empowering DVD, Art of Sensual Dance series, Striptease for Real Women. For 15 years, she's empowered women worldwide to stop people-pleasing and comparing themselves to others, eliminating perfectionism, and stop obsessing about appearance and transform their current relationship or find smart romance in a new one. Okay, please welcome Susan Bremer O'Neill. Hello, Susan. How are you?
Hey, Douglas. I am great and super happy to be with you today.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I really wanted to get you on after reading the bio, and I got to tell you that it's a little bit bizarre, your story. And before we get to the, oh my God, what happened part, if you could just do us a favor and give us a little bit of background on yourself, a little bit of your growing up, how your childhood was, and take us to the point where you were a scientist, okay? And then we'll go into the major transformation.
Certainly. My father was in the Army, United States Army, for 20 years, and so I grew up somewhat transient. My parents moved to Okinawa when I was very small. Matter of fact, my sister was born there, and we lived there a few years, and then we went back to Wisconsin. We went to a small town in Wisconsin every time my father went to Vietnam. So we were there a couple times, and then we bounced around in the South, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. We were stationed first, and then back to Wisconsin, and then back to North Carolina, and then to Fort Benning, Georgia. And that's actually where I graduated from high school at the age of 16. And, wow. At the age of 16. So I like to say that I was brain smart. I wasn't too body smart. And then I went on I followed my parents back up to Wisconsin, and I went to a technical school for laser systems. I studied laser electro-optics. And I got a degree in laser technology back in the early 80s when I was the only woman in the class. And I graduated from that with high honors. So again, brain smart. And then I became a technician, a laser technician. For one company, I flew all over the United States and Canada fixing and installing laser equipment. And then I also worked for a national research facility in California.
Okay, what got you into lasers? What in the world sparked that was what you decided you wanted to do?
Looking back, I think that it was a challenging course. It was given through a town close to where my parents had retired and where I was living. So it looked challenging. They told me that hardly no women went into it and that it paid the best when you graduated. And so that was my prerequisites for attending this course. also, as I looked back on my past, and I of course write about all of this, but as I looked back, I realized I think that I was trying to prove, specifically to my father, that I was smart, and I did.
Okay, no, it just seems like it's a very sort of specific field that, would require some kind of inspiration. I mean, that doesn't seem like something you would pull out of a hat. One day decide that you're just going to go study lasers. Now, how long did you do that?
I went to school for 2 years, and then I worked in that field for 12.
Oh, so
yes.
Quite a while. All right.
Quite a while, yeah. 9 years at the laboratory and 3 in private industry.
Okay. So now the big question. What made you go from that to exotic dancing?
Well, I mean, just isn't that a natural transition? Of course, I'm joking. Yeah. You said it was kind of bizarre. And honestly, Douglas, there wasn't a lot of conscious thought. The piece that I didn't share with your audience and you yet is that throughout those years when I was brain smart, when I looked really good on paper, when I looked like a capable woman, I mean, I was, but I was also using substances, drugs and alcohol to escape who I was, quite honestly. And so it was while being a laser technician, working as a scientist with engineers and physicists in Livermore, California, that I became a sober woman. So now the thing with substance abuse of any kind, and distracting yourself with anything, we can overwork to distract ourselves. We can overeat. We can overgamble. I mean, so many things, over exercise. The thing is, especially with substances, your emotional maturity stops when you start using them. So I became a sober woman at the age of 34. But I had the emotional maturity of a 15-year-old. And I realized when this happened, I started to realize with time that I had a lot of feelings I had been stuffing down, and that I really did not enjoy my job as this woman working in this scientific realm. And I was searching. And it may seem cliche, but it was my hairdresser who suggested to me, because I was complaining about my job and things weren't going well. I was a perpetual victim back then. And my hairdresser said to me, "Hey, you've got a nice body. Why don't you try stripping?" Well, I had never been in one of those kinds of places. And quite honestly, I was very naive. I was just ready. I was just looking for something different. It sounded exciting. And so I hopped in my little car and I drove into San Francisco, and I went to, one place that I did not want to work at. It didn't seem to be of high standards. And then the second place I went into, it was, there was brass, there was mahogany, it was very upscale. There were gentlemen in suits sitting at white linen tablecloths. 4-star meals were being served. Of course, there was a stage and there was lights and music and women in evening gowns, and their hair was done and their makeup was done and their jewelry was beautiful, and the men were giving them attention. And that's what I fell in love with. See, I was wearing jeans and a hard hat to work. I was like one of the boys. And what I saw in this environment that seemed perfectly safe to me looked like fun. And I love to dance and I love music. And so I just decided to check it out. And it was awkward at first, as you can imagine. But I had fun there. And for a year I did both jobs, and I couldn't keep that up. It was physically exhausting. I mean, working only a few nights a week in the city, San Francisco. But after a year I had to make a decision, and I kept the job that was fun. And then I had to really make a lot of changes within myself and grow myself back up.
Okay, well, let me back up here a little bit. While you were working as a scientist, were you married?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, so you were single and you weren't really dating?
I was always dating, and I was married. I was married for 1 year as a young woman working at the laboratory. That didn't last. I really wasn't in the right frame of mind to be married. I was not today I am a conscious, thoughtful woman. I wasn't back then. I did a lot of things reactionary. And so I wasn't in touch with so much of what's needed for a person to be in touch with in order to have a decent relationship. I was always, the key is I was always looking outside of myself for validation. My business today of self-appeal is based on internal validation, and that's what I had to learn while being this exotic dancer. But back then, I looked to a lot of boys and then a lot of men for grounding and for validation, and it just never worked.
Okay, well, one of the things that I wanted to clarify, and I think you did a little bit, but when people hear the term exotic dancer, okay, stripper, and there's really, in the United States particularly, well, I think in other countries too, but more so here, people have this impression of it being very sleazy, very dirty, and then really there are two types of places like that. There's the one that you sort of described, which is like a very upscale gentleman's club where the drinks are $20 a piece. And people are well dressed, and, there's a nice stage and nice tables and all of that. And then there's the other ones that, it's like in a booth, and, you go in for a quarter and then the screen goes up and there's a girl on the other side. Okay. And those are the really kind of sleazy, they're usually connected to a porno bookstore of some kind. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to get a picture of which one you were in. And I'm assuming that you were in the more upscale, but you didn't go to any of the real low ones, did you?
Well, the first place I went into is no longer open, but it was called the Lusty Lady in San Francisco, and it was exactly the place that you described. It was
with the booth and
booth.
Yeah, okay,
right. And here I am, a single woman by myself, really, really brave, and I'm there, and I'm going into this place, and I go in and I put my quarter in because I want to check this out, and sure enough, a window goes up and there's tissues on, box of tissues on the wall, and a window goes up and there's women huddled in the center, and it just did not look very appealing to me. I didn't have to do this kind of work. And so, yes, there's that kind of place. And fortunately or unfortunately, the second place I went into was quite different. But over the years, because I did work for quite a while, over the years, some of the places that I went into had aspects of darker areas and places that could be considered a bit more sleazy. But I danced in a few places in Las Vegas. But the initial introduction was very upscale, and that's always what I gravitated towards. That's what I preferred. I like to think of it as an art form, at least what I was doing. And for the most part, it was. Some of what's happening today in the clubs is reprehensible in the way that the girls and the women are treated. But yes, my experience was mostly upscale.
So which one paid more, being a scientist or being a stripper?
Oh man, being a stripper paid more for me at the time, you bet. Now the thing with that is, and that was actually one of the attractions as well, because when I initially went in, I was making cash, and it came somewhat fast. Over the years, I realized it wasn't necessarily easy, but it could be fast. I had never seen that kind of cash before, and sometimes I could make working just a couple nights a week the same amount that I would make working a few weeks at the laboratory. So definitely the dancing.
Now, did some of the customers in those places, did they make an assumption that you were available, i.e. prostitute?
There was so much stereotype. Yes. And I wrote a poem one night, and I put it in my memoir, From Sex Appeal to Self Appeal. I was very naive. I was 34, 35 when I went in, and I was so naive. I had no idea that men would proposition me for sex, for money. I was dancing. I was a dancer. And initially I got a lot of propositions until, and this is the really great thing about conscious awareness and knowing who you are and being grounded in who you are. I got these propositions until I was clear that this was not something I was going to do. But I wrestled with that. And in particular, there was one instance where I actually ended up going into a hotel room with someone. I had wrestled with the fact that he had offered me a significant amount of money for sex. And I really thought about it. And then I decided, no, it's just, I just can't go there. I'm a good girl, and I wasn't going to do that. And then he offered me money just for nude dancing. And I rationalized that I could do that. And so I went into this hotel room with this man, and I tried to do it for a number of minutes. I don't know, 10. And I couldn't. Suddenly, Douglas, it's as if I saw myself from above. It's like my head had been split from my body, but then they merged, and I was very frightened. I backed off, and I got my pepper spray, and it wasn't really that he was threatening me, but suddenly I realized, what am I doing here? This person could kill me. Nobody knows where I am. And it was after that incident that I realized I would never do that again. And quite honestly, in the next 8 years approximately, I maybe only had a handful of propositions because I just knew I would not do that again.
Well, you sort of put up your own wall probably between you and the customers, and they probably picked up on that. That, sorry, I'm not available for out calls or takeaway. They probably could have picked up on that. Yeah. Was the guy in the hotel room, he didn't threaten you or anything? It wasn't, or did he kind of intimidate you in some way?
He didn't verbally threaten me, but he did scare me in the fact that he started to shift position and come closer to where I was. And
okay.
Yeah, I go into great detail, and I wrote with impact. When we're naive, when we're checked out of our consciousness, things happen to us, and they don't seem as impactful as when we look back. And obviously in that moment, it did seem very impactful. But as I looked back, and I thought, wow, how am I going to write about this? I wrote with a lot more intensity in order to try and make a point for any, especially young woman who might read my book and say, well, I'm not getting myself into that situation. So, yes, he had changed a little bit, albeit he wasn't really, really threatening me.
Now, how long did you do this? How long were you a dancer?
Probably 7 or 8 years. I think probably 8 years or just a hair longer, somewhere in there, into my early 40s.
Did you meet anyone interesting to the point that once you left dancing, you kept in contact with them? Or did you, once you made the decision to leave dancing, that was it, and you left everyone from that life behind?
There are a few women who I keep in contact with. There's some lovely, lovely women, and for the first few years, I didn't talk to any of them because I really set myself apart. And we're all mirrors for each other. So within that environment, I was afraid to be friends with them because they mirrored parts of myself back to me that I hadn't or wasn't able to accept yet. For instance, my desire to be admired, my desire for money and that kind of thing. But once I started talking to them, I just realized that we are all the same. I think all people are the same, but especially the women within that environment. While I may not have been friends with all of them, they had their insecurities, and they had their passions, and they had their love of something within themselves. And so I really started to admire and become friends. So There's a couple that I keep in a little bit of contact with, but our lives have moved on, and nobody that I pal around with. I've never been one to pal around with a lot of people anyway. And today I am married, so my husband is my best friend.
Do you think that the self-image issue is more prevalent with women than it is with men in terms of, insecurities about their physical appearance? I mean, it might be safe to say that some women, I don't want to categorize or, sort of lump women into one group because, we have equality in our society now where women can do just about anything men can do. And I think women, for the most part, are treated equally in terms of ability. But do you think women have more of an issue with self-image, with physical appearance? There's still a big market for makeup, sells billions of dollars a year. I mean, do you think that's just part of the female species, or is it something else, or is it sociological?
I think it's still very pervasive for women to have low self-image. Not sure if we I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around the sociological aspect. I think that we women have been conditioned for hundreds and hundreds of years to compete with each other, to be the ones who take care of others, therefore sacrificing ourselves. We have been continually bombarded for many years about what a woman should be. And that's the piece that almost played a big part in me becoming this exotic dancer. Was I had been reading magazines like Glamour and Vogue and Cosmo, and they were sending images just as they are today, and the way that our media portrays women, especially our celebrities today. They were sending images of how I was to be valued as a woman, and that was through looking pretty, through being sexy, and I hadn't been doing any of that in my life very effectively. So in that environment I got to, and I think that those are the same things girls and women are seeing today. And therefore, yes, the bombardment of continually being shown that we're supposed to have the makeup on, and our hair is supposed to be done, and our teeth are supposed to be whiter, and we're supposed to look this way. And basically what I tell the women that I work with is that according to the Huffington Post, I read a number of years ago, every day we're bombarded with anywhere from 250 to 3,000 advertising messages. And all of these messages are designed to do one thing, and that is to make us feel bad about ourselves. So we buy a product. So in that respect, perhaps that can be considered sociological. I think it is worse for women than it is for men. I think it's becoming more so for men in some ways. It's hard to work against all of the messages that are out there that tell us we're not good enough the way we are.
Well, I think the media certainly doesn't help people, particularly women, but I think men too, because we're so bombarded with images on the internet of these, beautiful people with beautiful bodies and, full head of hair and all of this. And if you have the tendency to compare yourself to other people, I mean, the amount of fodder that's out there to fuel your sort of insecurities is tremendous. I would guess that the only difference, maybe why it isn't quite as prevalent with men as with women, is because in a male society, men are more competitive with each other on output, on production, on results, where women might tend to spend more time on the physical appearance comparisons with other women. I mean, guys check each other out too, but I don't think it's not as blatant. Women can be very open about, oh, well, look at her, what is she wearing? Oh, look at that hair. guys typically don't, well, straight guys, I should say, typically don't do that as much. Gay men, it's a whole nother issue. But with straight guys, with heterosexual guys, they tend, even if they think it, they don't tend to say it openly, where women will. And I think maybe that's the difference sociologically, where it's a little more acceptable. Where women are expected to do that more than men. I don't know. I mean, I'm just sort of putting up this sort of idea. I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around it too, because it's an interesting concept.
It is interesting. And one of the things that I try and do, and I teach, I'm who I am because I've had to learn a lot of things in a hard way, and I've had to really evolve as a human. And I teach others, and I try and adopt myself to compare myself only to myself. And this gets really important, especially with aging. One of the other things that we could discuss is the way that aging is viewed in our society. Aging, the older I get, the more wise I get, the more I like myself, the more open and loving I am. And these aren't necessarily the qualities that you see on someone's body. You have to touch their heart or hear their mind before you can see that. And that's the real piece that should be rewarded, in my opinion. And focusing on the external, that's why I think what I'm trying to do is so important, because all of our external looks will fade. And you're right, as far as men go, I mean, I don't really want to go here, but it's so prevalent right now. I just have to. I mean, look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump, and then his recent tweets about his wife and Ted Cruz's wife. I mean, I'm appalled that this would even be out there in our dialogue in the media. But there it is again, a comparison of two women's appearance in what should be a political race strictly on ideology and facts.
Well, I agree with you on that. This particular election has gotten so into the gutter. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's become, they did a parody on SNL a few weeks ago. You know how they always do, political satire. Yeah. And when I watched it, I thought the real thing was funnier, because it's gotten so bad that the SNL thing just wasn't even funny. It was like, well, this is what's happening for real. What are you parodying, you know? Yeah. And I don't know. It's crazy. I don't really want to go there either, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. I guess, okay, so one question I was going to ask, and then we'll make the transition. I suspect that in that 7 years or so that you were doing the dancing, that your emotional maturity went tenfold. I bet you learned a lot very quickly. Did you become very streetwise very fast? Were you lacking? It sounds like you were sort of lacking that when you went in, but I bet when you came out, it was a whole different world.
Yes, you're right. My emotional maturity really grew by leaps and bounds, but only because I continued to look at myself and the positions that I got myself into. Because remember, I was a sober woman, and many of the people within that industry aren't necessarily sober, customers coming in, girls working there. And so because I maintained my consciousness for so many years, now there was a time when I didn't, I write briefly about, but because I maintained that, I was able to question my own morality, my values, my indoctrination. And in that respect, my emotional maturity grew. There's a whole segment that I write about accepting and getting to know my own sexuality in a way. And of course, I was not having sex within strip clubs. I don't know of many people who can. I never worked in clubs where that was happening. I will say that most dancers, especially the ones that I knew, weren't doing that. But there is a sexual aspect to that job that I was very naive about, and I had to come to terms with as I was doing the work. And the embracing and the valuing of one's body and one's sexuality as being valid and beautiful and special, that was something that really evolved to a different place for me.
So now I want to ask, what was it that triggered the turning, or perhaps the returning point that took you away from dancing? What did you have some kind of an epiphany in yourself, or what happened that you just said, okay, that it's enough of this?
It was a series of things. I think the first, and it happened over a number of years. See, it's not a profession. It's a profession that some may get into easily, but it's very hard to leave. In the fact, somebody said to me once, you have to get really tired of the money. You have to get to the point where the money doesn't matter. And the same was true for me. So I was only working a few nights a week, just enough basically to pay my rent and get my bills paid. And then I was always searching for something new to do, because obviously I was getting older and there is a lifespan. So there was extreme fatigue over the years, and I needed to be in quiet. I ended up living in the Berkeley Hills. I had a studio apartment up there, and it was just peaceful, and there were deer and raccoon and really escaping from noise and hubbub. And so that way I was able to balance some of the chaos and the noise of the work. Then over the years, as I just became more in touch with needing only validation from myself and not other people, other men, especially within that realm, I got to the point where it was difficult. One episode that happened that was the final straw in some respects was, I just got tired. Many of the places I worked in, we talked. I made a lot of dialogue, a lot of conversation. It was a lot of selling. I danced around in a bikini for the most part, with a top and a bottom. And so I was always selling myself. But one evening I went in and I had just been tired for a while, and somebody touched my leg. And now we tell children not to let strangers touch them. And for some reason, in that environment, it's typical. I mean, men had touched my legs, I had touched their arms, and da 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 da. But one night, somebody touched my leg, and I flinched. And it was a progression to get to this place. But I realized this is not right, and it scared me, and I left. And that was the significant turning point for me to move on. I just couldn't do it anymore.
Okay, so where did you go from there? What did you do?
Well, I had been teaching some classes in the San Francisco Bay Area, how to strip for your lover. And I was getting a really great response to the classes I was teaching through the Learning Annex. And basically, women were coming to me, everyday women were coming to me for a few reasons. They wanted to learn how to be sexy and have some fun in the privacy of their home. And they wanted to feel good about themselves and feel pretty and feel, get permission in a way to exhibit this side of themselves. And so I was working on making, I made a DVD. Anyway, I made a DVD, The Art of Sensual Dance. Today it's retitled Striptease for Real Women. So I was working on that. And then I transitioned to working catering part-time as a way to remove myself from dancing. And then I started having clients. I had personal clients, coaching clients. I was helping with their self-esteem, their confidence, some dancing. And that's just how my self-appeal business evolved.
Once you left, did you regret it, or were you glad to get out?
I was very glad to get out. I can remember looking in the mirror and thinking to myself, wow, you don't have to take off your clothes for a living anymore. It was very, very strenuous. If you can imagine always being concerned about, how your skin looks, or holding your stomach in, or, I used to apply a lot of instant tan because I don't tan in the sun, and just a lot of personal scrutiny. People may think that women within that environment are super self-confident about the way they look, but I think it's just the opposite. We have to be so focused on how we look that it continues that the self-image, the body image issues that we were discussing earlier.
You think that stripping and doing that kind of work perpetuates? I suppose it does, because you would have to be looking in the mirror all the time, and it just seems like a vicious circle, I guess.
It can be both. I mean, if you have people telling you, if you have men telling you, and women too, of course, more and more women started coming into the clubs with their partners, but telling you you're beautiful, that can really feed your ego, at least within that environment. But yes, then always having to, at least in my case, I can only speak for me, but be concerned about how I look. That was exhausting, quite honestly.
So now you're working as a self-help coach?
I am we can call me that. I like to call myself a life coach, but I focus on helping people build the relationships with themselves. I call that self-appeal. Okay. And so self-relationship and self-care.
Well, I have to agree with something you said a while back about as you get older. I think now I am more comfortable in my own skin than I've ever been. And I'm going to be 54 years old this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm glad I made it this far, because I can remember thinking, when I was in high school, and, the big deal at that point was the year 2000. It was looming, in the future. And I remember thinking many times, oh God, I'm going to be 38 years old in the year 2000. I'll never make it. And this is like when I was about 15, 16 years old. Well, that went by a long time ago. But I just don't have that same, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I just don't care, I guess, anymore. I've let myself go a little. I've been talking on the show about a diet. I've got to lose some weight. And I'm working on it, more for health than for, so I look hot in a pair of shorts, because I just don't care about that whole thing anymore. But inside, I'm very comfortable with myself. I have the confidence that I didn't have when I was 20. And it's funny. I mean, it reminds me of that quote of Mark Twain about, youth is wasted on the young. And it's so true, because, I keep thinking, well, if I just had this level of confidence back when I was 20, I could have taken off, and done something fabulous. But I didn't. I didn't have the confidence. And it wasn't necessarily because of my physical appearance. It was because of just, emotional insecurities, naivety, probably a lot of things. But now I feel so much better, and I just don't care about that. I comb my hair. I brush my teeth. I try not to. I shave. I don't look like Howard Hughes at the end. But it doesn't bother me that I don't look as wonderful as I did when I was 20 years old. I've sort of exchanged the wisdom for the looks, and I'm happier with the wisdom.
That's the thing. I'm right there with you, Douglas, quite honestly. And that's the thing that we may tell young people or people listening, but they're not going to get it in a sense, unless they're really, really smart and wise in their youth. And there are people like that. I had the exact same experience, quite honestly, of thinking to the year 2000 and thinking, oh, that's never going to happen. And sure enough, it happened and it passed. And here it is this many years after that. And I'm a woman and I still wrestle with appearance, in many respects, seeing myself age and having a few more body aches. But I coach and do myself to do exactly what you said. Eat for health. I eat far more healthy supplements. I actually started taking boxing recently, and I'm loving it. I feel strong, and I feel that there are so many things yet in life. And like you, if I would have known what I know today back when I was much younger, I would have done things so much differently. But the fortunate piece is we get to be who we are, and with all that experience that cultivates wisdom, and we get to talk like this and perhaps influence others who are not as wisdom filled as we are.
So you wrote a book, correct?
I did. It took me a long time, almost 10 years to write and publish. Yes. From sex appeal to self-appeal, one woman's journey to recover her body, her sexuality, herself.
Now, is this basically autobiographical? You go through your life story and how you got to this point?
Completely. Yes.
Okay.
I am an expert in myself, and
that's good.
Yeah.
Better you than someone else, right?
Yeah. I'm a writer at heart, and I was looking for something to write for a long time, and this was the first thing that I wrote that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And writing can be very cathartic and healing. And I wrote this in such a way, hopefully, that people will read it. The dedication is for all the lost girls and lonely women who are looking for love in all the wrong places and all the wrong ways, because that's what I was doing. And hopefully there will be insight into themselves based on my experiences. It is not a book for everyone. I don't shy away from some of my less than smart choices, and but I've been told it's a fast read. It can be a good read. I had one talk show host say it was riveting, which made me feel really great, because first and foremost, I want to be considered as a good writer.
Let me go back to something we were talking about. In my mind, sex and love can be two different things. People who are obsessed with sex, like we were talking about, you can drink, you can do drugs, you can eat too much. There are those people that are kind of addicted to sex. Do you think that people that are constantly changing partners are being just like the free love of the 60s and 70s? Is there something that drives people to do that, to constantly searching for that sort of, I guess, affirmation that, that, oh, this one finds me attractive, this one finds me attractive, this one. I mean, it could be kind of a high for people. Did you experience that emotion when you were dancing and when the men were sort of all ogling you? And was that part of the appeal?
Well, there's a difference, I think, from what you were talking about sex and then and then dancing. So I do want to make the distinction that those are two different things. First, as far as sex and going from partner to partner, I agree with you. There is sex and love can be two different things. And now, if you have love with sexual intimacy, that's what we're all striving for. But sex, too frequently, or with different partners, or jumping into bed with someone fairly quickly, is actually a way to avoid intimacy. Intimacy comes from really knowing someone, and that can enhance the sexuality with that person. So that's my take on frequency and jostling of sex partners. It's a basic drive. It's like animals. Jenna Jameson wrote a book, How to Make Love Like a Porn Star, a number of years ago. I never read it, but it just made me laugh. because porn stars don't make love; they have sex, and there is a huge difference, right?
Yes,
and,
there is.
Yeah. So, and then as far as what I was doing, there was a part of me for a long time that needed the attention and needed the validation. And for many reasons that I've tried to explore over the years, I needed to be in that position of power, even over men, as far as controlling within that small realm of the dance club. People who feel powerless will try to put themselves into positions of power. And I think that for many years as a young woman, an adolescent, and then in my 20s, I felt like men had control over me. And so it wasn't a conscious thing. I didn't think, oh, hey, I'm going to go and dance for these guys and control them. It wasn't that at all. But looking back in retrospect, I think that was an aspect of one of the things that I gained from being a dancer.
I want to apologize. I think I just fired off 3 questions at you all at once, and it came out sounding like one question. But you did a very nice job answering. My mental energy sometimes comes in blasts like that, and I'm glad you followed it. So thank you for that. Yes, I agree. I agree with you that making love and sex is 2 different things entirely. Sex is just a mechanical process. Making love is a commitment, an emotional commitment. And I think people need to make that distinction, because obviously that book threw them right in the same boat, and that's wrong. It is, exactly. It's funny, but it's wrong. Now, do you think there's anything wrong with people in general being sexual objects for other people's gratification? In other words, people who make pornography, people who pose nude in magazines. Is there anything wrong with that?
Yeah, I haven't really thought of that. I do know that people have thought that there's been a lot written about women being objectified, as dancers, as porn actresses. I never felt objectified. I felt empowered. I was in control of what I did and where I was. I don't think, I think we get into trouble when we start labeling things as right or wrong. And that's sort of what I had to come to a conclusion of within myself as far as working in that environment, because I had been raised in a religion, and everything that I had been raised to think told me that I was wrong. And that's when I had to start questioning, well, what am I doing? Am I really hurting anyone? And I wasn't. Now that doesn't mean I didn't make some foolish choices that I had to learn from. I did, but I wasn't doing anything quote unquote wrong. As far as in general objectification, I think that there needs to be a stronger voice out there sending a message, putting a message out there that this will not bring you happiness and love. And I think that that's part of my mission. If a woman wants to pose nude in a magazine, and if a man wants to buy it and look at it, then no one's really being harmed. But it's the young people, the young girls today, the people who aren't getting the message that, hey, that they're adults and they're consenting and this is their choice. They're not getting that message that there's another side to this. And the other side is that if you think this is a way to be admired and to get love and be happy, which I think really is what we all want. I think we all want to be connected to somebody and to have that commitment. That's not the way to get it. And I don't see a lot of messages like that out there right now.
Well, I think that's a good point. The other thing, we're kind of running out of time, so I wanted to hit on one more thing here. You were published in Men's Health magazine, which I thought was kind of interesting. What was in Men's Health magazine? An article?
Many years ago, it was an article. I think it was titled "The Raw Power of a Nude Woman," and it was about.
That's nice.
I think that's the title, and actually I should get that up on my website. But it was an article. They came looking for someone to write an article, and they actually had an agenda. But it was my byline and some of my story and my picture.
Well, we are kind of at the end of our hour here. I want to thank you for coming on the show. Please tell everybody where your website is so they can come and look at you and check it out and buy your book. Yeah, the DVDs are still for sale. Are they on your website as well?
Yes. My website is selfappeal.com. And there, if you want, you can purchase an autographed copy of my memoir. The DVDs are there. Also, I do offer I have a free video training series for people who might want to start to raise their self-image. It's Love Your Body, Change Your Life, and it gives an introduction to myself and to some of my self-appeal concepts. Also, my book, From Sex Appeal to Self-Appeal, One Woman's Journey to Recover Her Body, Her Sexuality, Herself, is on Amazon with reviews, along with all the other major online booksellers. Yeah, selfappeal.com.
I do want to ask you quickly, striptease for real women, how is that different than, I'm not following how you can have different sort of categories of striptease.
Oh, the reason it's striptease for real women is in 10 of my former students actually are in the DVD with me. And these are not models. These are not strippers. These are everyday women doing simple moves. And just like if somebody, your wife, girlfriend, mother wanted to do it, these are very, very easy, simple things.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Yeah. I get it now. Although that was a terrible picture you just put in my head about my mother. Oh, God.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. That was not a visual I wanted. Susan, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a real treat talking to you, and good luck with everything you're doing. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, Susan Bremer O'Neill, and thank you to Christophe Duvalier for that wonderful music. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.